Saying Notelock is the most hated system in Osu is like saying the sky is blue. It's pretty much the only part of the game that is broken, but that also has a simple fix. And yet, it hasn't been. It's also extremely important, and in a lot of ways very necessary despite this. So what is Notelock? Why is it so hated? And why is it still in its current state? This is Notelock, the most hated mechanic in Osu. First off, what is Notelock? Well, in simple terms, it's a system which makes sure that you can't hit an object before the previous object's hit window has expired. In even simpler terms, it is, you cannot hit object before previous object gone. It's fairly simple, and it makes perfect sense why it's in the game, since obviously you don't want players hitting objects in the wrong order. So, what's wrong with it? Well, there's one big problem, which is that two objects' hit windows can overlap and cause hits that are perfectly in time to cause Notelock, especially on high BPM and low overall difficulty. This video is pretty much a perfect example. You might be thinking this is a pretty niche scenario that would hardly come up in gameplay, but it's actually exceptionally common, because of events like what happened in this video made by FunOrange, where he misses a jump, which means that despite tapping every single object of the stream on time, he still misses every single note, and fails because of it. This is why the real biggest problem with Notelock is not just that it can cause misses where you made no mistake, but also that it carries on to the objects ahead of it, meaning that you can miss every single object in a pattern without making a mistake on that pattern. This means that it completely contradicts what would normally be considered a miss, since it can make many the result of a mistake that you only made once. All of this is why most people consider Notelock to not be an unnecessary feature, but almost certainly a broken one, which has caused more harm than good. This is the background of why Notelock is hated, but I think the most interesting thing about this entire situation is not just why it's broken, but the vehement reaction from the community and the counter reaction from Peppy, which represents pretty well a big problem that Osu has. So let's get into why Notelock is actually the most hated system in Osu. Over time, the community has seemed to grow from a dislike of Notelock to a sort of fever pitch in recent years, which really isn't that much of a surprise, since Notelock is much worse on harder maps with denser rhythms, which have been ranked much more in recent times. But I think there are also other factors that I think might have contributed just as much, or maybe even more, to the boiling point that we're at now. And that is Laser and Peppy. First, with Laser, since it makes the entire situation much more complicated. This is because it's going to be the successor to the version of Osu we play now. And so, if Peppy thought that the current Notelock was perfect and just right for the game, it would have been implemented identically into Laser. But it hasn't been. Peppy has said how he thinks that Notelock works well for low-starred maps, but not for crazy hard maps like the ones that are being ranked a lot of the time now. This is why he proposed a toggle system where mappers could turn Notelock on and off, which makes sense. But this isn't quite how it works in Laser, since currently Notelock is basically non-existent. This is great for Laser since it fixes one of the game's biggest problems, but it also says something else to the player base. And that is that Peppy knows Notelock is bad, but is too lazy to change it in Standard. I don't think that's the truth. Actually, I think it's quite far from it. But that's definitely the vibe it gives off. Which also leads to the second problem. And that is Peppy himself. I think Peppy is probably one of the better devs Osu could have. If you watch his streams, he spends a huge amount of time developing the game. But I'd also say that he's not always the best communicator. This is because a lot of his responses to people on the topic aren't the best. I think this is the biggest problem. Since if you were like I was when I was trying to research this video, trying to find a reason that he couldn't put Laser's Notelock into Standard, you won't find a really clear answer. With the best one that I could find, after an admittedly fairly short period of research, being that it would break all current scores. This is definitely an answer of some kind, but it's not exactly intuitive. Since as someone who has no idea how Osu works, it feels like what would happen would be much more like a PP change, where scores would change, but they wouldn't break. And the problem was that upon trying to research further, I saw him say, "Look at my blog," where it takes scrolling through many pages to even find a mention of Notelock. Now, we all know that I don't have the best track record when it comes to research, But this info shouldn't be this hard to find, since many people will come to the conclusion that Peppy just doesn't care about the players at a high enough level to be screwed over by Notelock often. And the almost even bigger problem is that this creates a cascade effect, where lower level players will listen to these players who don't feel heard, which is exactly what got Peppy and the community into this situation. Because, at least in my opinion, there probably is a reason Peppy can't fix Notelock unstable, since for not that much effort it would save him from a lot of negative attention. It's just about communicating the exact reason why, so people stop, well, people are going to keep complaining about Notelock, but it would at least not be directed directly at Peppy for not fixing it. That seems like the best solution to me. But seeing as the fever pitch has died down for the last few months, I could see how he could find it much less of a pressing issue. So that's the controversy around Notelock. A broken system that's technically been fixed for years, which has become the most hated in the entire game for just how important it is, and how little has been said about why it actually can't be fixed. And I think that's pretty interesting.